crowds and protests. Number 2, right to bear
That's
arms
what's up.
and cannons.
That's what's up.
Men didn't know about handguns. Number 3, when soldiers get sleepy, you don't have to let them sleep up on your couch. Number 4,
Bring those beats.
search and seize, it protects me unless people have a warrant to arrest me. Number 5, if you arrest me, respect me. Sorry,
all right, guys,
there's
get this
no
down.
double jeopardy. What'd you do at
The
school?
Constitution
What'd you do
outlines
after
the
that, dude?
basic principles of our nation, the structure and the responsibilities of our government to the people and the people to the government. It's a social contract. All right, so that was a great song. I'm trying to stop it. Okay, but get this down. We're going to talk more about this. So this social contract. So the Constitution is an outline. It's actually written in an outline form. If you think about it, it's got the preamble, which is the introduction, and then it goes to Article 1, the legislative branch. Article 2 is the executive branch. Article 3 is the judiciary branch. And then we go down the line, how they amend the Constitution and how we confirm or we actually establish the Constitution. All that's in there. Not very big. I believe it's the smallest constitution in the world. It's also the oldest. You have to remember that the Founding Fathers are starting something that hadn't been there since ancient Rome or ancient Greece. So you're talking 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years. About 17, 1,800 years before this. Last time we've seen any kind of form of a real democracy or a republic. So it's a big deal. So you follow the outline, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. So Roman numeral 1 tells us how the legislative branch works, and it'll tell us how you elect and how the representatives are chosen. It's all in there. Not much, but you'll find out the judiciary, Article 3, there's not much in there at all. And we'll get more and more into that. Now, it's really inspired by kind of the setup of what's called the Magna Carta, or the Great Charter of 1215. The British had the Magna Carta. It served as a way to lay out the foundation for the evolution of a parliamentary government. So this is basically where the king and the parliament are coming to some kind of agreement and widening some rights for individuals, okay? And we'll look at this document ourselves. So this idea that there are some things that people are entitled to, even though that the king is the king and he has powers from God, like this idea of, for example, due process of law comes from the Magna Carta. This idea that you have what's called habeas corpus, where the judge or the king brings you before the court and actually reads the charges to you and tells you, well, what did you actually do wrong? It's Latin for bring the body to court. So that's really important, that you come to court and the judge says you're being charged with stealing a car or first degree theft or something like that, instead of you just sitting in jail not even knowing what you're charged for. Could you imagine how scary it was before the Magna Carta and due process in the United States? People just went to jail and they didn't even know what they were in trouble for. And then they would torture people into confessions that they might have done things they didn't actually do. Now, the Magna Carta shaped and influenced the U.S. Constitution very much what it influences our Bill of Rights. And it gives us this idea of a rule of law. It's the beginning of this very important idea of rule of law. So under this social contract that the Enlightenment philosophers argue, one big idea is you have to have rule of law, which means the law is the rule, and that we all have to follow the expectations of the law, including the President of the United States. President of the United States can go to jail. They can receive consequences. They can, if they do things that are unconstitutional or they break laws. It's not true that the president can just walk up and hurt somebody or kill somebody. That is not true. They could still be brought up on charges. And now, when you're president, you have a little bit more flexibility with the power. However, the idea of rule of law is nobody's above the law. Police officers are not above the law. If a police officer hurts somebody or kills someone, they are not above the law under the idea of rule of law. Teachers are not above the law. Just because I'm the teacher of the class and the authority of the class, I can't do illegal things. For example, I can't make up attendance. That's one thing that schools have gotten in trouble. Because we get more money for our school if I make up attendance. That's against the rule of law. Even though that might benefit our school and get more money for the students, and you'd be like, oh, he's a good guy. I'm not following the rule of law. And that's really important. That if you want to change a rule under the Magna Carta or in the Constitution, you're going to have to push on your representatives in America to amend the Constitution or to make a new law. You can't just break laws and then try to change them later. Now, we're getting into one exception. One argument is from Martin Luther King and Mohandas Gandhi, where they argue if a law is not just, it is no law at all. We'll get much more into that. That's a good question. If the law itself is unjust, like Jim Crow laws or segregation laws or black codes, where African Americans and people of color were treated separate and not equal, was it just for Martin Luther King to refuse to not, or Rosa Parks to refuse to give up her seat for a white man? That's a different question. But we're assuming under rule of law that the laws themselves are just, and under the social contract, we've all agreed upon them. So you see there's King John of England and the signing of this famous Magna Carta, which it did take away some of the king's power. He gave some up to keep the monarchy going, but not completely. The king was still in charge, but it gave some individual rights to people. And then America is going to really expand on that. So what does the Constitution do? Let's break it down piece by piece. First of all, it tells us how everything works. It tells us how the legislative branch works. It tells us how the executive branch works, how elections are held. It tells us if the president's doing something right or wrong, what could happen. It tells us how checks and balances work. How do you check a legislative branch that's out of control if they're just passing crazy laws? Well, the Supreme Court could declare them unconstitutional, and then the president can veto or refuse to make the bills into laws. The laws of the land. Okay, so these are laws that will stand unless you amend or actually change the Constitution. The duties and responsibilities of leaders of our nation, very important. What is the duty of the president? What are the duties of legislators? Do they just get elected? They sit there and they vote sometimes? Can they just not show up? I don't know. It says in the Constitution what they can do. Does the president have the power to just make laws whenever he wants? Probably not. That's the legislative branch. It says in the Constitution. The duties and responsibilities of us as citizens. Remember, we don't get away with this. This whole idea that the social contract is all about the government, what they could do for us, I don't think that is fair. Social contract means that the citizens themselves are the popular sovereignty, and the power from the government comes from us. However, we have responsibilities. Like if you don't vote, I don't understand what argument you're going to make that the government's bad or unfair. We just had an election. We saw more people vote than ever in the history of the country. And it really changed things. And also showed that people are much more engaged, maybe civically or in the government and voting than in a long time. Not as high as before, but we're getting up there. We're moving over 60% voting, which is really big, considering at one point we were barely at 50% of Americans that could voted. So something's changing. Created a limited government, or the document of the U.S. Constitution limits the powers of the government for future generations. We have a limited government, which means it follows a rule of law, and everybody in the government should follow the rule of law. They're limited. The king could do whatever they want. A king is an unlimited government. A dictator is an unlimited government. A tyrant is an unlimited government. Oligarchies can be unlimited. All that stuff. The Chinese Communist Party is probably going to do whatever they want. They just start kicking out all the Democratic elected representatives in Hong Kong. They can do that. They're a unlimited government in their mind. A limited government can't do that. We have to follow processes. And that's why a written constitution was seen as very important to the founding fathers. We have to actually write down the limits of citizens and the government. And we're going to find out in the Bill of Rights that individuals are protected from the government later on. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the history. The Constitution was actually ratified in 1788. It's pretty much done by 1787, but the official ratification was 1788. Federalism, it establishes this really important idea of federalism, that the central or federal government is more powerful than the state government. Okay, and there's many layers to federalism. Before the U.S. Constitution that we have today, you had the states were more important than the central government. That was called a confederacy. Our federal government is stronger than the state government, and if there's ever, we're going to find if there's a battle, and it becomes down to it, the federal government almost always beats out the states. Not always, but almost always, based on what it says that they could do in the Constitution. Okay? But we have federal government, state government, and local government. That's federalism. And they all have separate powers, and they have concurrent powers. Some powers that are kind of shared, or they both do. Like, they both have taxes. So they both levy taxes. So you pay federal income taxes, and then you pay state taxes, depending on what state you're in. You might have state income taxes, and you might have state sales tax. So they both could tax us for services. The rule of law, we just talked about, no one person is above the law. And that's really important. All people must follow the U.S. Constitution. And that it's written down. This is what we got to do. And also they established a republic. And we've talked about how a republic establishes citizens will vote for someone to represent them. This is kind of a check on the people. Americans can't just do what they want. We vote for representatives. The representatives are supposed to act in good faith and do the right thing. And they might have to actually go against their constituents at some point. Another check we had is the Electoral College. If you think about, that's checking us through a federal system. We don't actually elect the president. Technically, it is the electorates. So they vote for the president, not us. We vote, no, the system's been, the way it works now is we vote in a state, and whoever gets the most of the popular vote within that state gets all the electorates, usually in a winner take all, except for Maine and Nebraska are two states that divvy up their votes. That can't change, though. All right. Now, what it establishes, this is really important, are these two ideas of explicit powers, are laws that are rights that are clearly written in the U.S. Constitution. So if something is explicit, you could see it, you can understand it on the surface. Then you have implicit, which are implied, are laws or rights that are interpreted by the Supreme Court to be in the Constitution. So explicit power, we'll find out, is the legislators can write laws and pass bills to become law. Okay? And applied power might be that we'll find out is that Congress powers may reach, they might be able to make laws that change that are necessary and proper over time. That's what we're going to go into in a minute. Now, very important case we'll look more at is McCulloch versus Maryland. And this established this idea of a necessary and proper clause. This is a very important idea. We'll look at this in class. And how do you define federalism? I want you to think about this idea that if something is necessary or proper, according to this case, Congress can do it. So the Founding Fathers and the Constitution saw that things are going to change. What Congress needs to do with its powers might change. And it expanded them. This case very much expanded Congress. The legislative branch became much more powerful in 1819. And we'll find out later on in this class that some of that has changed. So let's look at the original Constitution of the United States was called the Articles of Confederation. That was up until created in 1781. It gave states more power in the central government, and many leaders, it caused a lot of leadership difficulties. And we broke that down in another video and talked about that. Lots and lots of problems. Everything from who was making money to how do you raise funds for an army. You had states with armies, and things weren't coordinated. It was very hard to fight the Revolutionary War under this. 39 out of the 55 delegates that signed to ratify the new Constitution at the Constitution Convention, the original capital of America was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in 1788, were all white men. So no, there was no Italian Americans, no African Americans, no Latinx. There was, to my knowledge, obviously no openly gay men. It was all men, and when I say white, I mean white Anglo-Saxon. So they were British heritage usually. So that's going to really shape how the Constitution, whose point of view the Constitution was written from. So just then, think about it. What form of type of government do we have in America today? We have a republic. How do we decide who will be the leaders that run the country? We choose them through voting and electing them. And that's it for today.